You win.
You're metal, dude.
Dudes.
Deliberating. Deliberating. Deliberating.
Dogface.
Deliberating.
Dogface. I'm the dude.
One minute, dude.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fight!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Deliberating Dogface Dudes. This is episode number 7. Has Hollywood had a negative impact on society? And I am John Roeland. I am hosting and moderating this episode, so that's the first time for me. We have a special guest with us today, and how we're going to do this is we're going to go around with some brief intros, who you are, where we can find your work, and then we're going to go into some intro statements about, is Hollywood dead? The current state of the entertainment industry. Okay, first I'd like to introduce the guest below me, and we've just met, so I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself to me.
Hi, John. I am Hunter Muse. I am married to Chris Snipes and co-host of the Melt podcast. I am a psychonaut, but not a psychotic, which is a good thing. I am a biological female. I feel like you got to say that if we have the conversation about Hollywood. We have to preface everything with what gender we were born with. And I am a curious questioner of the human experience. I would say that is probably the best overview that I can give you.
Great. And right next to you on the bottom?
I am Alan Marcus. I think I was assigned the position of agnostic Muslim, but I'm not sure if I could say anything more about that at this point. You know, sleeper cell agent. You never know what I'm going to say.
Popular position. It's way more popular than you'd think.
No, the truth is I'm a Mormon filmmaker, and I'm here to sell you on edited films to take out all the content that should not be seen ever by anyone, ever, anywhere. I don't care if you're on an airplane and you're watching a movie or you're in a dirty theater. You know, obscenity laws exist for a reason, and let's bring them back. Maybe. I'm not sure if I'm decided on that position or not. We'll see what Benjamin has to say.
Hail, I'm Benjamin Balderson, and obviously you can find me here with these fine gentlemen every week on the Deliberating Dogface Dudes. What's up, Boohead? What's up, Christy Krinkle? You can also find me on Saturdays on Weaving Spiders Welcome. We're taking a little break from that because upcoming we have the Flattoberfest event that Marcus and I will be attending. I will be presenting a Spagyrics demonstration live, which other people charge $5,000 for the same demonstration and information, and you get it for the price of what Karen charges for a ticket. Pretty awesome. So hope to see everybody there, and look forward to this.
I have a question about that. Is Spagyrics the same as Spirogyrics?
I assume that's I assume so.
Because Because the first time I was on Weaving Spiders, the way I ended it with you is I said, I'd love to have you on the show to talk about Spirogyrics.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
I thought that was maybe a Chuck Mangione reference.
Awesome. Speaking of which, she was on episode 263 of the Spiders, and we had, I would not have called it necessarily a debate, but closer to a debate style conversation that was absolutely wonderful, including transsexuality and the place in the world. So super interesting. Anybody that missed that on Weaving Spiders Webs. So given that, I mean, it was honestly just a fantastic conversation. And I'm really looking forward to this one tonight.
And we may dip back into that because one of the books that I in my last meditation, I was like, oh, we should talk about this too, is this book, which is Dr. Amon Hillman's Hermaphrodites, Gynomorphs, and Jesus, She-Male Gods, and the Roots of Christianity, which is a really interesting read. I'm in the middle of reading it right now. And it basically covers the idea that our perspective on gender is completely wrong and that there have been all types of versions of sexuality and gender throughout history, and that the church has worked on maybe rewriting history to make it this very binary. So I'm interested in kind of weaving that into this discussion because I think Hollywood has played a massive role in the woke mind virus that is selling this idea that men are women and women are men, and these sexual inversions are part of potentially a greater agenda, but maybe not the one that we think is the agenda.
All right. Well, in order to try to keep this a little bit more formatted than we have in the past, I do have a 5-minute timer. So as we go around, we're going to let Hunter start first, and then we'll kind of pass it in the order that we introduced ourselves. So Hunter to Alan to Ben, and then we'll try to do like 3 more rounds of 5 minutes each. So then if someone made a comment you want to rebut, or if an obvious question pops up that we want to move the conversation further. So we'll do 4 rounds of those in all, and then we'll open it up, and then you guys can start, talking over each other. But so we're trying to just keep it a little bit more disciplined. What are you saying, Ben?
Yeah, and try and kind of save the rebuttal, because after the 5-minute periods, that's just laying out your positions. And then the rebuttal periods afterwards, where we can have an open dialogue and discuss and question and clarify. But during this, we're all just going to basically mute while you're talking, so you can get out your position that you're going to hold later.
Gotcha.
Yes. So this is a much more contrived conversation that we're having here. But it's exercise, and it's, again, a good way to break out of the echo chamber. Okay. So we're going to start with Hunter. I'm going to start my timer. It's a real gentle timer, so it won't startle you or anything. And, it's a soft 5-minute timer. So First, you, Hunter, I'm going to ask you this. Is Hollywood dead?
I think the soil that Hollywood has been nourished with and birthed out of is definitely dead. I think the old studio system that Hollywood was really entrenched in and was basically the infrastructure of Hollywood is absolutely been eviscerated and destroyed, primarily by corporate America, sponsorships, the CIA, these 3-letter agencies that have gone in and basically used films for decades now, we can say, since World War II, used films as propaganda machines to promote war, to promote whatever nefarious or even not nefarious agenda that it may have. So the basis of what Hollywood, maybe the initial intention of Hollywood, has been completely just obliterated and does not exist anymore. Now we have this machine that is really um, entrenched in this idea that movies aren't necessarily a form of entertainment. They are a form of programming, and the intent is not always for films to be successful. There are many films that are made that are designed to not be successful, and certainly not for a broader worldwide audience. So I think what has happened with this, what we in this space tend to call the woke mind virus, what's happened is that there has been a narrowing of storytelling and a fear of telling stories that fall outside of that paradigm, or that agenda or that propaganda. So my sense is that uh, that has killed creativity, because now the idea of making a film that is artful, that does not fall within that paradigm, seems outrageous. I mean, even in the indie film world, if you're wanting to make a film that is $2 million, that's considered a micro budget now. Most films that are being made are in the 50 to $100 million range, uh, with the intention that there's a very limited uh, group of directors that can be trusted with that type of money. And it seems like now the shift is away from feature films and now has gone into these limited series. So you have some directors being given 80 to $100 million to develop a television show. So I think that has really changed the uh, just the format that entertainment is being shared and given, but it's also created this isolation. So you don't necessarily have to go to a movie theater to see a film, so you don't have this collective experience with 150 or 200 people or 50 people in a room all seeing the same thing at the same time. Now you are isolated in your home and you're viewing something maybe on your phone, or on a train, or not even on a television anymore. So I think because of that, it's a lot easier to doctor the message, because you don't have a consensus around you that is either agreeing with that message or maybe pushing back against that message. So it's easier to indoctrinate, or it's easier to mind control someone when they're staring at this very tiny little image and it's just, them and that image. So, yes, I would say empirically that Hollywood as we know it is dead.
Great job. Just under 5 minutes. All right, I'm going to pass it to Alan. Is Hollywood dead?
If by Hollywood you mean the film industry, what are we talking about in terms of Hollywood? Hollywood means so many different things. It means everything. It means nothing. Hollywood is La La Land, where dreams come true, where women from anywhere in the world get on a bus, go west, and then become stars and sex symbols that everybody recognizes, that type of thing. So I don't think it was ever alive. I don't think it was ever a real thing. So to ask if it's dead, well, there's a lot of clarification that needs to happen. If we're talking about this as being a business with the sole purpose of investing the smallest amount of money possible for the maximum financial return, I don't think that model has been in play for many, many years. You'd look at something like Francis Ford Coppola and then giving his daughter the money, and then this sort of the Hollywood elite. So it's like when filmmakers were over on the East Coast and they were developing film, and then the government started to say, hey, well, we got some patent concerns here, we got some copyright concerns over there, we have some concerns. They packed up and they went to the other coast, and they got away from government, and they got away from church and morality and everything. They just went Wild West, and they decided, here's what we're going to do. They tried a lot of different things. And at that point, there was a financial aspect. Money was maybe real because it was based off of a gold standard. So there's so many factors that we could look at in terms of the idea that Hollywood as an entertainment industry, which has expanded beyond the 85-minute film, where they found the perfect length of film, how many reels of film would they put on at the theater to show it on the projector, and then maximizing butts and seats, having as many showings in the theater as possible, because a theater was a very important thing in the community. Every community would have a theater. It was like a church for many people. In fact, I think there's a quote saying something to the effect of certain religious groups are in control of this industry, and they're telling their stories, and other religious groups should not go and see films that are speaking to undermine their moral values. This type of argument has existed from day one. We've had censorship, we've had MPAA and rating standards, and maybe that aspect is dead. I don't know if any movie today even bothers to go through to get a rating. If you watch a film on Netflix, do you know what it's rated? Is it R-rated? Is it PG-13? Is it suitable for kids? Do you go to a Christian movie review site to see if this is going to have enough nudity to keep you interested in the thing? There isn't even nudity in films anymore. So what's the point of seeing it if there's nothing to see? So with the question, is Hollywood dead? Was it ever alive? I think we need more clarification on that specific topic. But that's kind of where I'm at, and I'll pass it over.
Go ahead, Ben.
All right. Interesting stuff. Today, the subject is Hollywood dead? Is the first point I have no personal connection with. I am debating this strictly from a devil's advocate point of view. Myself, I live off grid, and I'm as close to a Luddite as you currently usually will find. So this is a very odd position for me to take the pro of, and I am going to be a good exercise of mental elasticity. With that said, Hollywood itself boils down to the entertainment industry. With people born in the 80s, 70s, 80s to the early 90s, finding Hollywood itself as the center of entertainment. Before this, it was a much more broad thing with game shows and whatnot being out of Walla Walla, Washington, funny enough, weaving spiders. And these things being much more localized, it became a much more national and then global thing in the 80s and then 90s. Entertainment has always been subject to evolving technologies, as many industries are. With radio replacing reading and the occasional play when they visited town, the moving picture replacing plays and reading, and bringing this to any town that had a big screen. And today we find streaming directly to your home to be the method of consumption. 100 years ago, you may have seen one or two plays in your life, read one or two books in your life, with the exception of a king who could afford court entertainment. Today, the poorest of people can receive a welfare smartphone where they can consume entertainment every moment of their considerable free time. Historically, there have been few storylines with everything boiling down to a hero's journey, which is a comedy, or a tragedy. With the overconsumption of products, like any glutton, the flavor is in exchange for the sheer ecstasy of taking in more than you can use or enjoy. Very similar to what's displayed in the Hunger Games, where they consume food only to puke it out just so they can consume more food, obviously defeating the entire point to the exercise of eating. With that, the stories all appear the same, and the actual entertainment dies. We become Romans at a Colosseum, yawning behind soft, smooth hands until moments of the sheerest violence or the deepest sexual depravity bring a moment of feeling. That is a failing in society itself, and new stories with grander visual effects will not cure that sickness. With that, I don't believe that Hollywood in and of itself is dead. I believe we suffer from a dying society, and Hollywood is just the visual representation of such.
All right. So we're going to go into another 5-minute round for each speaker. The thought that is popping in my head is something that Hunter said was the initial intention of Hollywood. I wonder if we could maybe elaborate on what each of us think the initial intention and maybe potential of Hollywood was.
Now? Okay. Okay, cool. That's a great question, because there's probably the intention that maybe the businessmen that were settling that area had, and then there's the intention that the people that maybe lived in that area that were supporting those men had, and then there was the intention of the people who decided to come to that area to find their fortune or find fame or find some creative outlet. I think that's absolutely maybe the infrastructure of where all of that started. Um, but it's very clear that in that period, that was a short-lived period. So I think very quickly people recognized, as Benjamin was saying, that the evolution of what was happening is that the need to connect directly with knowledge was pivoting and shifting into a different direction. So if someone's not reading a book and they're not using their imagination to create a world, then they are basically using a surrogate for their creativity or their imagination. I think the people who first came to Hollywood, came to that area, recognized that. And the idea was selling a dream or selling a vision of something. And so that first infrastructure, the intention was to create places that they could do that in a very controlled environment, because the weather was good. You have all different types of landscape in that part of the country, so you can create lots of different types of imagery. So I think that they recognized, just from a climate perspective, the access to there's more days in the year that you can create and you can build and you can do things. So I think that had a very specific element in the decision to go there. I don't know if that answers the question, but I feel like that's kind of the basis of what you're asking me.
Marcus, thoughts?
Jim.
Yeah, many thoughts. And the question having to do with, what is the point of Hollywood, or what was the initial intention of Hollywood? The evidence shows that a Hays Code was established in 1934.
Mm-hmm.
So there was this idea that, well, we can record moving images. We can show anything could be seen that had not been seen before. Many people discovered that, well, you could point a camera at certain features of certain bodies and get reactions and more people showing up, like the Nickelodeons, where there'd be a striptease show. So now instead of having a woman or a man perform each night to do a striptease, that person could get in shape, put on the best costume, do it once and never again, and then play it back over and over and over again. And every time it costs a nickel, and you spin the thing and you look at it and you see, there it is. You want to see the striptease again, put in another nickel. Now, when the Hays Code came about to create a self-imposed set of standards for the industry wanted to regulate itself. So at that point, they decided that because of the cultural climate of the times and the people of the great nation of the United States of America all believed that profanity was profane, that suggestive nudity was suggestive of acts that they didn't want their young people and old people to be engaging in. They wanted people to be wearing clothing. They wanted a society to function. They wanted morals and rules. They didn't want to break taboos. They wanted to remain with the taboos of the time and not show graphic or realistic violence, sexual perversions, or rape, or any type of content that would be upsetting to anybody. I think at that point as well, they were more focused on telling realistic stories. That is to say that the level of fantasy with computer-generated graphics that we've gotten to today, which is so far from realistic interpretations of day-to-day lives, that stuff wasn't even really in consideration. Now, they would experiment with special effects and other things because that was the entertainment thing, pushing back to say, well, real life is boring. We're going through a Great Depression. People are out of work. They're hungry. There's not much hope. We've had war. A lot of people died, so they needed to uplift the spirit. So at that time, the purpose of Hollywood, through the military involvement with this, was to portray America as the good guys, American soldiers as heroes, so that when American soldiers return to American soil, they would be welcomed as heroes. Contrast that later on to something like Vietnam, where those soldiers returned and they were not considered to be heroes. They were not honored or respected. They didn't get the help and treatment they needed. So that's sort of in contrast to where Hollywood started. And then as other generations of filmmakers, who were probably sons and daughters of the previous generation, continued the legacy, the family trade, this type of idea, then they began to rebel against their parents and the films that they made. So then you get to something like the 1960s, getting into the 70s, where you have more experimental filmmakers pushing the boundaries, including more nudity, more sex, more destructive behavior, more sad endings, more realistic in their eyes, more realistic, where people die at the end. No one has a happy ending. Everyone fails. There's no success, this type of thing. And that's not even including like Disney fairy tales, which seems to be its own industry set apart from others.
All right. Ben, I might have given you more time, Marcus, or less.
Before I start, how long was my intro?
You were under 5 minutes.
Yeah, I was originally our first format was 3, so that was what my original shot was. I added in a little bit. I was just curious.
I think you were right around 4.
Yeah, I tried adding in a little bit just to stretch it out just as I was going. But so yeah, I'm pretty happy with where I landed anyways.
All right, so we're talking about the initial intention of Hollywood. Ben.
So pivoting off of my original point that you can boil Hollywood in and of itself down to just the entertainment industry. Let's look historically then at the entertainment industry. One of the oldest people and societies that we know had heavy amounts of entertainment was the Roman society. We turn around and we look at Caesar and his messaging to the society and the plays that surrounded that. This was heavy propaganda in order to get that society to view the actions that he wanted to take in a positive light. Whether it was, and funny enough, when at one point in time, when Caesar was trying to drum up a certain type of support, he painted Germanics as these terrifying, almost demon-like beings that were unstoppable. And then shortly thereafter, within a few years, he's painting them as this savior cause, because at this point in time, he's pushing for war with the Gauls. As a savior cause, you start seeing this. We look fast forward to the times when plays were more commonly known. We see things like Vikings having horns. And now today, good luck convincing people that Vikings never wore horns on their helmets and that would have been the epitome of idiocy. Like, in no way would that have any battle functionality, and in fact would have been an extreme handicap. So then we fast forward to today's most famous playwright, Shakespeare. Shakespeare was well known for the different narratives that he pushed inside of his plays. There was a large anti-Semitic, not that I'm particularly on that page, but there was a large anti-Semitic movement in Europe at the time. And we can absolutely look at his plays and we can see things like the Sheeny Curse, a Shylock, any number of different things that in that time period were definitely known to be racial slurs, racial or generalizations, all the things that society talks against now. So this was something that always was one of the functions of the entertainment. And then we look at where entertainment came from, again, where Marcus was talking about with the 50 cent or the nickel Nickelodeons, where that then opened up access to a broader public. The funding of it always came from the wealthy, and the wealthy have always had interest in swaying the public. So when we look at it, you would have to convince me that this wasn't always the case, and that no matter what form of entertainment you're consuming, be it books, where I can find 50 books on the same subject, all taking a different side, depending on what side the user wants, or I can watch a National Geographic program where the cub is dying and it portrays it as this, gentle thing that's trying to fight for survival, or the mother of this other cub that its cubs are dying without this food. The story in and of itself, especially in a society that has become so focused on subjectivity rather than objectivity, that is not the fault of Hollywood in any way. Entertainment's still serving the entertainment purpose. The propaganda's always been the propaganda. It's society's fault for not policing itself, and always has been. When we ask other people to police for us, our mind, what do we expect other than things that we don't want? And yeah, Vikings were all horny, raping and pillaging.
All right. Just under 5 minutes. Good job, Ben. I was going to let the alarm shock you, but now you got out just in time, man. All right. A couple of thoughts on where to go here. I'm kind of thinking about doing another round of 5 minutes and letting each of you kind of focus on a specific topic that you want to talk about, because I don't really want to direct the conversation too much. Having my own thoughts, taking notes on everything you guys are saying. Very interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it to you, Hunter, and give you 5 minutes to just kind of freestyle on, what your main point is and what you think about this topic? Go ahead.
I am positing that the propaganda machine that controls any version of entertainment has been in place as long as there have been stories that have been told. So stories were used, storytellers were basically like the newspaper that traveled from one county to another county, one town to another town. And they really control the narrative based on their perceptions, uh, their ideologies, the things that they were focused on. So I think that the propaganda aspect of storytelling is deeply entrenched in the human experience because in order to have an objective perception of something, you have to be able to see something from all sides. And as humans, we are tasked with seeing something subjectively from our perception. And that is a survival skill that we have. So you can go into an environment and see if it's safe or not safe based on your perceptions, based on your subjective experience. I think that that is what has been used to drive narrative in every culture worldwide. And that's why you see similar stories being told in many different cultures that have no connection with the other, because I think that these allegories or these stories that have been told are useful to control people or to motivate them, or to shift their focus on something. And I think that has been the driving force in the entertainment industry. It's really about what the next war is, or what the next cultural war is, or what the next experience that these machines want us to be having. But are they based in an objective reality? No, no. I think it is very subjective. And so this is why you get these movie executives who don't read scripts and are greenlighting projects of something that they've never read. They will open a script, read the opening scene, and either say, yes, this is a story that I want to tell, or no, this is not a story that I want to reinforce, or that's not the place that we want people's attention to go. So I think that if you understand the use of storytelling just and at its base, then you can have some other perspective where you could see, like, okay, am I buying this? Like if I go to see a film or I watch a show, the first thing I say to myself is, what is the agenda? What are they trying to get me to feel or think, um, or to stand behind? So I think the thing that is most critical in this is that we are able to have some degree of discernment in this messaging and be able to, you know, Paramahansa Yogananda said once, you can leave the movie at the point that you want it to end, meaning that you don't have to buy into the narrative that whoever the storyteller is telling you is trying to push forth. You can say, no, I don't want that to be the ending of this movie. And I think that there's enough of us that are questioning the these, very lowbrow films. One of the reasons Marvel is struggling right now is that they have gone so out off the fucking rails that people aren't buying it anymore. And so these massive franchises are suffering because there is a consciousness awakening that's happening, I would say globally, where if things don't resonate with you and your perception and your subjective experience, it's it's not going to land. And I feel like that's where we're at right now. We're at this pivotal point in filmmaking and in television where there's certain narratives that have been deeply, deeply entrenched in our society, and people are just saying that doesn't resonate with me.
Nice. Good job. That was very well spoken and great points. Alan, what do you want to focus on?
I have an interesting argument coming from an education where after high school, there were many people around 2004 or 5. Hollywood was still the dream for a lot of people. And the idea of going into television, film, broadcasting, the media, whatever that was. There were a lot of people moving in that direction. And at that point, we talked a lot about the so-called democratization of the media. We were using digital film cameras, and the format was getting smaller and smaller. We didn't have to lug around huge reels. The discussion there was now the printing press is given to everybody. People have computers. They can print their own newsletters. They can Xerox copy them out, send them out. That was happening with cameras, video cameras, movie cameras, camcorders, the ability to record moving images and sound, and then on top of that, computers to edit the film with non-linear editing, which was made very affordable. So with this democratization process and the promise of allowing a greater base of creators from all walks of life, as the saying will go, the democratization process, where everybody who wants to make a movie now has within their means the ability to make a movie. That's the promise. But with the establishment of a film industry and Screen Actors Guilds and other clubs and other legal status of requiring laws to be followed to make the movie, it kind of created this appearance that anybody could make a movie. It's like the freedom of speech argument, and then the freedom of reach punches you in the left jaw and the right jaw, and it's like you're just getting beaten down for trying to create something, but then no one can see it. And then entering film festivals, well, that's a joke too for a lot of people. But then the more disturbing factor is this idea that humans are lemmings. They follow the leaders. They have their idols. If everybody wants to be Steven Spielberg, then they're all going to make Steven Spielberg movies, which is to say the film grammar has been established. Before the ruling class allowed the democratization of filmmaking and movie making, they established a film grammar, meaning what is expected of a movie. How do you watch a movie, and what is the play out of the movie? Is it a 3-act story structure? There are established tropes. There's the hero's journey. Everybody learns that Star Wars was based off of Young and Joseph Campbell's Heroes with a Thousand Faces. So everybody is all using the same language of film, the same grammar of film to tell their own story. But as it turns out, the story is the one story that's allowed to be told. So we have this idea that anybody can make a documentary film. Anybody can make a narrative film. It could be fiction. It could be nonfiction. It could be anything you want it to be. But at the same time, the self-censorship steps in and says, this is what is expected of a documentary film. There's a language and a grammar to the editing style, to the punctuation, to the marimba music to let you know this is a serious, truthful film. All of these tropes have been established and they're copied again and again. So instead of having this endless creativity, we have an audience who wants the familiar film grammar that they are used to. So they continue to keep the established film and entertainment idea alive. So if Hollywood is dead, it's all of us that are responsible for killing it, because we didn't support the creative filmmakers who were testing the boundaries of what they could do in terms of the film grammar, the editing style, long takes. But to answer the question, is it dead? Yes, it's dead, because when I go on Instagram or YouTube, all I see are film reels, and those are 30 seconds or less. The attention span has gone down to 30 seconds, and then 3 reels later, I can't remember why did I walk in the kitchen?
My kids call it brain rot.
That's absolutely what it is, and it's rewarding.
Absolutely amazing, isn't it?
Go ahead, Ben.
So when we look at any kind of a story, aren't parables also trying to get you to see things in a certain way? So no matter what kind of story it is, the person that is telling that story is going to be trying to get you to see things in a certain light. Some of the most enjoyable stories are the good old M. Night Shyamalan or whatever. You know, what a twist, where he's gotten you to see things one way, and now part of the entertainment is that entire storyline, and now you have to go back and rethink this entire story. So even in a most benign and entertaining way, they're definitely trying to lead your mind into a certain way. With that said, once again, we start looking at society in and of itself. And while your typical movies have started to die off in the movie theater, once again, I would state that while movies themselves in a movie theater have died, streaming is more than alive and well. That the average person is consuming, even when I was a kid, where a person might watch 2 hours a day, maybe 3 of entertainment, and that person was considered somebody that was taking in a fairly extreme amount of entertainment. Now most phones come with a screen time monitor to tell you how many, whether you've spent 12 or 16 hours a day or whatever it is, with your face glued to entertainment. So to say that that's dead, I would say that's dead in the version of a phoenix, where it is just burnt off the dross, become something new, and that new thing has vastly more power than the old thing did. And not only that, but we've now allotted the ability to expand this, where before things were subject to elaborate sets, and those elaborate sets cost a ton of money to build, and where you can look at, especially in the 80s and 90s, you can look at different movies and start noticing that set's pretty much the same set. They've just done a little bit of something different to, give it a little spice, and reused costumes, things like that. Now we have green screens. You can turn your living room into outer space or whatever it is you want. And it's now we're just talking about quality is all that we're talking about. Now, when we look at something in the 80s, where that 80s mentality, we had the Superman trope in the 80s, that kind of thing was extraordinarily popular. I would say that the Marvel's downfall currently is just a miscalculation, where they don't realize that the power currently, just as a societal thing, and I don't think this is even their pushing, to be honest, the anti-hero story is now the primary story, where that has now replaced the hero. Nobody actually wants to be virtuous and good. They want to be a shithead and still considered the good guy. And I would say, again, this is more of a reflection upon society. And during a short time, Hollywood failed to recognize that the actual Superman, I do right, I don't swear, I'm the nice guy, that even the bad guy doesn't get killed. He just gets a slap on the hand and you're a baddie. That kind of thing is not societally accepted currently. And Hollywood in and of itself had to make adjustments where you see the Deadpool versus Wolverine, two extreme anti-heroes, has grossed more money than any movie in history. So this is, again, society's issue, not Hollywood's.
Is Hollywood dead? The current state of the entertainment industry, and has Hollywood had a negative impact on society in general? I was thinking maybe we could, are there any responses to anything anybody else said? Start there, and then we'll kind of open it up. So Hunter, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to respond to things the other guys said, and then we'll pass it around.
If we're going to go into the responses, should we just open it up then? And why don't you give a little in between, give your thoughts on the entire thing, and then we'll open up into a more free thing. Because look, we're at 50 minutes. You give your little thing. That's like perfect, and that gives us another hour to kind of do back and forth. So why don't you give kind of a summation of what you thought of what's happened so far, maybe?
You mean me? Okay. I would say different thoughts I've had. Obviously, it's a form of programming. How much worse is the programming now, and why? That's kind of an obvious question. It deals with the technology and, as Hunter covered, how we consume. I have a hard time not thinking that the whole thing was militarized from the beginning and was some type of mind control thing. The other day I was, putting on the Looney Tunes so my kids would, stop watching YouTube shorts. And the Looney Tunes, I was thinking, is this the beginning of brain rot? They're funny, and to me, they're more entertaining than what these kids are watching. But, as I picked up my daughter from college today and I see all these kids on their phones in their own little worlds, and thinking about when I was in college, I would have had to interact with people. I would have been more encouraged to interact with people. Now you've got everything you want, your own little community, your own little echo chamber, making you feel okay about sitting there, instead of, if you were in that mode when I was that age, you might be looking down at your shoes to not make eye contact with people. Now they've given you a device to not only allow you to avoid people, but also encourage you to and support you in that. So that's kind of my thoughts. I will say this, in terms of the other side of the argument, I would say there is an ability to put in allegories about what is going on in the world. For example, the movie They Live, or the movie The Matrix. Now, you could consider that programming as well, but it does feel like there's some type of messaging coming through for a deeper level of consciousness to emerge. Is that programming? Is that natural? Does it just get subverted by the system, like most things? And then also movies like Network and Wag the Dog, which to me are revealing the method of what they're doing. So perhaps Hollywood is not only a programming, it's showing the official narrative. It's, for some of us, we can see that with discernment and understand what the narrative is, possibly predict what's coming. It seems like as of now, we're predicting things backwards. Hindsight is 2020. We're seeing all the things that were there and then what happened. But now as we move forward, I feel like maybe we can, use these symbols and these clues to possibly subvert whatever their goals are. So, and I'll go ahead and open up the forum to anyone who wants to reply or say something.
Beautiful. I have notes, as they say in Hollywood. So, to circle back to what you said, well, first of all, just to touch very quickly on what you said, John, I think one of the reasons why kids are so mesmerized by the phone is that they are using frequency as a method of mind control. And I think the closeness of that frequency really informs how addicted you are to that device. I've seen kids like this, scrolling like this, like people who have autism, you know, neurodivergent folks, that they just can't get in there far enough. But to circle back to what Alan said about the democratization of Hollywood and the promise that we are all filmmakers, or that we can all uh, be filmmakers, I take issue with that. You said everyone can make a movie, and I would posit no, everyone can shoot footage. That's not a movie. Everyone can take a selfie. That's not a portrait. So what has happened is this dumbing down of what we consider art or what we consider filmmaking, where everyone feels like they are making a movie because they're shooting a 30-second reel on Instagram. I also take issue with you saying that everyone is using the same language. I think, yes, there's a mainstream narrative, there's a mainstream structure that we are all kind of used to. But there are filmmakers throughout history who have not used the three-act structure, or who have used it in different ways. So it's not beginning, middle, and end, it's end, then beginning, then middle. So I think that's something that's worthy of noting. Um, and I think that, yes, that language is copied over and over and over again in this very transient, very pedestrian way. But that is not necessarily filmmaking. That's movie making. And I think those are, yes, we can say that's a semantic, but you know the difference when you go see a Marvel movie and when you watch a Fellini film. It has a different texture, it has a different tone, and you react differently when you are seeing a film, because it's resonating at a different level for you. Um, so I don't agree that the audience wants the same film grammar. I think this is the dumbing down of culture, and we are saying everyone wants a fucking Marvel movie. Well, not everyone wants a Marvel movie, and people that are going into, if they're paying $20 to see a film and they want to be entertained, not everyone is wanting the confection of film or a movie. Some people really want to get in there and see something that either they can't relate to and doesn't resonate with them, and they're interested in learning about a different culture or a different way of looking at the world, or they want to see something that is confection that just makes them feel good. So I think what stories are, what the world is the story you consistently tell yourself. This is the world that we are building internally. And so when some folks go to the movies, they want to see the story they're telling themselves. They want that to be reinforced. And some people don't want that. I think you're correct when you say that attention span is dead for some people. But I just recently watched a 5-hour film with my husband. So I think, again, it depends on where you jumped on this speeding train. So if you grew up like I did, um, where I was watching long form films as a little kid, I have the attention span where I can sit down and kind of get in the seat of my soul and invest in a film. There are people that have no interest in that whatsoever, because they grew up in the stream of having a phone from a very young age. So they're used to this rapid fire information, and they want to keep that going in their brains. Um, I love what you said, Ben, about parables or trying to get you to see things a certain way. And when you mentioned M. Night Shyamalan, I was thinking of the day that I went to go see The Sixth Sense, and I leaned over to my partner in the first minute of the film, and I said, "That kid's dead." And he was like, thanks for fucking ruining this movie for me. But it was because there's just a slight energy that I perceived where I picked up on what was going on. But what M. Night Shyamalan is relying on is that people aren't understanding the nuance of that film that he is making. So I think there are some filmmakers who see their audience as intentional and intelligent and capable, and there's other filmmakers who just are confectioners, and that's all they want to do is just feed you candy. Um, and all these things are so intrinsically connected to masculinity. And you really hit on a great point when you were talking about um, Superman and the anti-hero and kind of the idea of uh, the male trope of the alpha male trope. I think there has been an intentional castration and emasculation of men, because why do you want 300 million strong men protectors in one country? You don't want that. You want to divide and conquer. You want inversions. You want to create confusion so that men feel powerless, because then they can be controlled. And a lot of this is about control, not only controlling narrative, but about controlling mindset and making people good soldiers. So I think a lot of what you were saying, John, about the social awkwardness, I really, really resonate with that, because I was working in a bar in New York City in 2007. And I can fucking tell you the day I was in the bar when one day men were coming in, looking at each other, awkwardly looking at their shoes, get a few drinks, they get a little Irish courage, then going up and talking to even other men. And then the next day, everyone's like this on the phone. And it was a marked shift in, now I don't have to worry about this social discomfort, because I have this shield between me and the rest of the world. And I think that social awkwardness is how many how many wars have been won because of that, how many women have been conquered because of that, because you've had to push through that. And so allowing people this buffer is the thing that has stopped people from actually making real connections. I think movies like Network, Wag the Dog, even Bowfinger, They Live, these movies are a litmus test to gauge people's reactions. What they're doing is they're showing you what they're doing, what the agenda is, and let's see how many people start a civil war. Oh, no one's starting a civil war. So we know we can move the line a little bit further, and we can move it a little bit further. So all of these things are with forethought. Can't necessarily say malice, but I'm definitely saying forethought.
Good points.
So you don't think that is the responsibility of the consumer? That I understand that if we put this comparatively, that the person making an indie film is probably punching out a Kia, as opposed to the film industry, which has vastly more monetary backing, so they're punching out Lamborghinis. But you don't think that that's a real representation of the free market, when the free market doesn't choose to go to those exact movies, even knowing, let's say that the free market has decided Hollywood is no good? Why did it not invest its time into the indie market, and then with that, its monetary influx, which would absolutely bring a rise about in the quality of the movies? If we look at Northern Europe, where the things that we're going through, I would say we're 10 years behind Northern Europe as far as the social conditioning that has happened. I would say we're a full 10 years behind Northern Europe. So we look at some of the most heavily propagandized countries that have been through this, and what do we start seeing? We look at Iceland. Iceland has actually made, for the first time since the Christian world made it illegal for heathens to have a Hof, to have a place where other heathens gather and tell stories and share spirituality. That is back. We start seeing movies like The Northman, which we would normally consider an indie film. That was not a large Hollywood film, but still managed to do as well as the vast majority of Hollywood films today. And we look at movies like The Promised Land. The Promised Land isn't even in English, boys and girls, and that still was wildly popular. So the free market itself is speaking. And with that, I do think that I will have to concede that Hollywood has gotten stuck in a narrative. But I would have to state that when I got married, my wife comes from literally the Valley. Like everything Hollywood represented, that was her life. That was what she thought the entire world was. Mm-hmm. And she had not really traveled outside of California. And the thing about California is you can literally find anything here. It's a crazy place where you can be like me and live out in the mountains surrounded by redwoods and living off grid with animals running all over and bears shitting in your yard, to being on the beach, to being in LA down in the grind of the city. Mm-hmm. You can have all of it in California. And so these people in California don't realize there's a world outside of California and that people don't necessarily see things the way they do. So in Hollywood, in and of itself, you see this giant echo chamber. But because the entertainment industry has broken itself apart, if you're just going to those people to see it, yeah, you're going to get that one message. Mm-hmm. But you can go see anything. And that's honestly always been the case. During the 80s, when we lived in this highly Christian world where George Carlin made a joke of the things that you could not say on television, we've now moved from that, where that was, you guys, really tonight. Completely lost my train of thought.
George Carlin.
Yeah, George, where you had that kind of thing. We've progressed entirely, in Hollywood in and of itself. We have to boil that to the entertainment industry, because the only reason we call Hollywood the entertainment industry is because at one point in time it kind of coagulated there. Mm-hmm. But the entertainment industry's vast and broad. They still had crazed, while we had most movies being the 80s version Superman type movie, where literally a white t-shirt was basically an 80s sex scene. You could find what was the name of that guy that made like The Fly and all those movies that were just
Jeff Goldblum.
Well, Goldblum was the actor, but what was the director's name? The guy who made that special effects that were just super gory and Cronenberg.
Yeah.
You know, you could find Cronenberg at the same time. It's just all depended on you, which is why I'm saying it's not really on Hollywood. This is entirely on society. You even look at something like the Marquis de Sade. Like when the Marquis de Sade came out, if that was something that these weird people weren't about, then nobody would have bought his works. It would have died right there. But people were voracious for that kind of thing. And that was hundreds of years ago. Like, this isn't a today thing. People were absolutely about depravity and loving it and bathing themselves in it hundreds of years ago. This is just a cyclical thing, and they're just providing what the consumers want. It's the consumer's problem.
And the consumer wanted one thing. The reason anyone would go to a movie theater on an afternoon was for the air condition. If they didn't have air condition, if it wasn't a comfortable room, no one would sit through any of these movies. They're all terrible. They're all uninspired. They're all predictable. They're all so boring. So without air condition in the theater, no one's going to see these movies. Other innovations have been 3D movies. Every so often they come around, a new generation tries it, realizes how terrible it is, and then it's gone. They had other innovations like smell-o-vision, where you'd have scratch cards. You know, the little number shows up on the screen, you scratch the card, you breathe it in, it's disgusting. You try that gimmick once, and then, you know, never again. They had tinglers under seats where you get zapped or electrocuted. They had water mist machines. You know, all these sort of innovations in the theaters only went so far. Consumers don't want innovation. They don't want to be surprised. They don't want to be challenged. You get a movie director like Christopher Nolan, sometimes he's praised, but then he releases a movie like with Tenet where it's going forwards and backwards and the audio was terrible, and then you have to read the subtitles. There's so much going on that people couldn't get lost in the film. When I'm talking about film grammar, I'm talking about the way the film is edited so that the viewer is not pulled out of the scene. If there's a continuity error, for example, Forrest Gump, he's got his hat on, and then it cuts back to him and his hat is gone. People are going to say, well, wait a second, where did his hat go? So unless it's shown on the screen, the film grammar has to show what's going on. Films are showing actions of characters. And then Mike Figgis comes along in like 2000 and he shows 4 screens on one screen like we're seeing now. Now we have 4 faces, 4 separate screens, 4 videos. Yep. They tried that with this time code movie where they would have essentially 4 movies playing out at the same time on the screen, and audience were like, there's too much visual stimulation here. I want one thing to focus on. I want simple film grammar. I don't want experimentation. I don't want to be challenged. I don't want to see an art film unless I'm going to an art gallery. If I want to see an art film, that format has navigated into the area of music videos. Short form music videos have been the place for creative experimental filmmakers to go. It's set to music. It's short, under 10 minutes. You know, Michael Jackson's Thriller was a little bit longer. These types of ideas. But for the film viewing audience and for filmmakers today who go to film school, or they get a Robert Ramirez, you know, or a book where you can do film school at home. You read the book, you watch the DVD, you read the masterclass lectures and these types of things where the masters are teaching the students, and the students today just want to imitate the masters who have already made everything there is to make. There's no new story to tell. There's no new way to film a nude scene. There's no new way to light it. I mean, people know what art is and they know what art isn't. And if they go to a movie and it frustrates them because of a continuity error, or they can't hear the volume because people are mumbling. There was a whole genre of independent film that got called mumblecore because everybody kind of just mumbles over each other and they're all talking at the same time. That's not what people want. People want to hear one voice at a time. They don't want an Altman film where you're walking by and you're hearing all the ambient audio and all the conversations happen. No. People don't want that. They tried it. They didn't like it. They spit it out. They don't want it. People understand what a film is supposed to do. And all of the hard, rough edges have been sanded off. The turd's been polished so much that it shines. People want to be given what they want. They don't want anything more than that. They don't want to learn a lesson. They don't want to go into a film and have to do an occult decoding. And anybody who tries to do an occult decoding is sort of like, if they're serious about this, are they underestimating their audience to say that pointing at a skull in a movie and saying this is a movie about death because the skull is a bone from a dead human? This type of decoding has gotten so dumb and ridiculous. And anybody who does a decode today, pointing at a symbol and saying, see this symbol? I have to explain to you what the symbol means. Symbolism is written into the script from the first draft. And then the second draft, they add another layer of symbolism. They keep throwing in more and more symbolism into the movie because they feel the movie has to have a meaning and it has to have layers of meaning, and they have to make it artistic. And the artistic integrity and the value of the film is judged based off of the use of the symbolism, the colors, the sound, everything that goes into the movie is so pushed into the film by everybody on the film set. You can't blame the writer. He's not responsible for the movie. You can't blame the director. He's not responsible for the movie. The editor has more responsibility in terms of the edit and the final cut of the film, but he's not the person who filmed any of it. The actors themselves, they have to say the lines that are in the script. If they get into improvisation, they're going to get slapped on the wrist and treated like cattle. What did Alfred Hitchcock call them? Cattle. The film industry is so tightly constrained. The acting guild, that's one guild. You get the writers, they go on strike. Bye-bye Hollywood movies. There's no movies for 2 years. No television, no nothing, because the writers are arguing about an issue, and they do that every few years on cycle. You can set your clock by it. So there's nothing new, there's nothing unpredictable, and there's nothing exciting. It's dead. Absolutely dead. Dead.
I gotta say, I mean, I don't know, I guess you consider this Hollywood, but like the show Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Mhm.
I mean, I get a lot of pleasure out of that show because, I mean, at least by the final season, I kind of understood the flow of it. And like, it's almost like he had you guessing what dumb mistake he was going to make or what crazy thing would happen. And then it would be something that you didn't predict, but like, I'd be sitting there trying to predict like, oh, this is going to happen, you know, or this is going to happen. And like, I don't know, to me, like that was, I experienced that as like very creative the way they wrote that. It's like it had you thinking about the setup, and so and it makes me think about English literature in high school where you don't really understand like it's just a story. What are we looking for? And there's this deeper meaning that's there, but depending on your level of consciousness, you may or may not see it. And I do think that. Maybe not, I don't know, modern, films of today, but I would say, I mean, my favorite film is Fight Club. And as I watched that over and over, I was actually taking sociology classes at the time. And my teacher is telling us that it's Marx and Freud mixed together, and I'm just like, oh, like I didn't, I liked it for what it was, but now I see it's this deeper thing. And so, I mean, that to me, that's my favorite one. And I definitely think that, there is it's something for you to expand your consciousness on some level. I don't know, again, what the intentions are behind the people. There may be a deeper level that even the director doesn't know or the writer doesn't know, but somebody in there is putting in something that's worthwhile to me to think about.
It's Satan.
Well, from your perspective, Alan, it's a dude. When you said that, like the writer, he, the director, he, it's just as a writer and a director, someone that's working on those crafts, I just found that.
So I'll ask you now, if I call a woman who's an actor an actress, does that denigrate her craft? Does that lessen her? Is that a diminutive?
No, I don't think that at all. I think that
Well, you're wrong. Because
I'm completely ready to be wrong. I love being wrong. That's actually where I learn the most is when I'm wrong.
I thought it was hilarious when you were mentioning the difference between indie film or a cheaply made film and a quality made film. I don't know if you've ever watched that series called Black Flags. I think no, Black Sails. It's called Black Sails. It's a prelude to Treasure Island, and in it there's this scene where this pirate has counterfeited this masterpiece painting, and he's trying to get it to the seller, and the seller's like, how could you possibly expect me to sell this off as a masterpiece? He's like, vase, flower, tit. Because in the picture, there's one tit hanging out, she's got one boob exposed. And he's like, all the elements are here. What's the problem? Like, oh, fuck, that just made me think of that scene, which was absolutely hilarious because they kept art. Because then the painter's like, what do you mean? This obviously doesn't look the same. I can't sell this as a masterpiece. Flower.
I patently disagree that the audience is this, nebulous automaton that we can say the audience wants this. I don't agree with that at all. I think that that's the mentality of the studio executive that is going and having a conversation with their 15-year-old and getting advice about whether or not they should buy a movie because they think the 15-year-old knows what a 60-year-old man wants or a 45-year-old woman wants. I don't paint with such a broad brush, and I have seen so many amazing films that have been made and television shows that have been made in the past 2 years that are smart and thoughtful and creative and interesting. I would point you to a German show called Dark that's on Netflix, or the new Apple TV show Dark Matter. And both of these shows are about interdimensional travel. And what I find fascinating is this collective unconscious where people that are not only creative, but people who are sentient and alive are having these visions or dreams. And then someone is going and taking that vision and dream and writing a story, and then able to collaborate with someone who can art direct that story and someone else who can set direct that and property master that and act that. I think there's an entire ecosystem that exists in the filmmaking world of people who are thoughtful and brilliant and smart, and they're getting their art made because this low hanging fruit, the dumbing down of the human consciousness is not working anymore. And I think one of the benefits of the debacle of the past few years is that it gave people a pause to sit back and actually maybe read a book or do something creative, plant a garden, like maybe be in their world in a different way where they're connecting with something that is perhaps grander or larger than themselves that has actually helped them get back to their nature. So I see the spectrum of filmmaking and television making broadening. Yes, there is the pocket of the reality television eddy that some people are swirling in, and that very much has legs. And the reality show franchises of like home improvement shows or real estate shows, like there's this aspirational living aspect of television that very much is consumer driven and people are really into. And then there's this other aspect that is maybe more thoughtful. So I think there's a spectrum now of art that you can reach, or entertainment that you can connect with, that's not just in this country. So, because we have these devices or the internet, we have an ability to connect with stories that are in China or in Japan or in Africa, in areas that we may never visit, but we can relate because we are being given the capacity and the capability of seeing the sameness of the human experience, regardless of where we are on this earth.
So I mean, wouldn't that more go toward the point that we're making, though, where the entertainment system industry really isn't dead? It's just diversified and become less homogenized in that, it really, which I think kind of matches almost every other entertainment system, whether it's, we don't really see the 1980s style concerts where we have bands every weekend filling Madison Square Gardens and other things like that, where we're starting to see more local productions, smaller productions. I think this just fits again with the time period, but I think it absolutely says that the entertainment industry is alive and well. And in fact, I would posit that we are by far the most entertained society that has ever been, and that that is without the. It's almost like blaming the food industry on people being fat. Like everybody wants to blame the industry as if they didn't consume it themselves. Like the food industry didn't make you fat. Nobody from McDonald's was kicking burgers down your mouth. And it's not how it worked. And so the ones that are having an issue, this is what they consumed. It's what they wanted. And we're just at a very, very whiny time in the world. And I think that we're also at a time where we're just made this transitional shift where we've moved to more localized, less polished, which again is just the free market speaking. And with that, the diversity is extreme. I mean, look at you could make a posit that the guy was a plant and that he was pushed, but you look at guys like Oliver Anthony, who doesn't have a record label, and because of today's services, he exploded. And then you look at the same token, guys that think that they're a fairy princess, gremlin queen, and dressed up, and they'll have 5 million PewDiePie followers, whatever the fuck that is, and like these people are just over entertained, over consumed, and that is their problem. Maybe go outside and do something, and the world won't be so weird. Yeah, I know this was a hard debate. She picked a subject that I'm definitely not on the pro side.
Sure.
I'm doing my best to stand up for Hollywood.
Sir.
It's a hard job.
Sir, Hollywood is Bollywood. Praise President Kamala. This sort of globalism, universalism, one world government, one world religion, one world cinema is not great for America. Hollywood, at its best, was spreading democracy and defending America from all the foreign threats. So now we have this subversive aspect of film that we need to talk about, where the propaganda from other countries, other groups of people that wear specific sized hats on their heads, are in control of all the industries of the world, and they're subverting all established orders. You look at a movie from 1964 that broke the Hays Code, The Pawnbroker. It became important for the plot of the film to show the woman having her clothes forcefully removed as she was forced to surrender herself to another man. This was a forceful situation, very important to the plot of the story. And because of this Trojan horse tactic, people got a taste for the human breast, the female breast, the woman's breast, I mean, now you could probably see a man's breast. You could see anything you want in a theater now. It's tolerated. There's a level of tolerance and acceptance and diversity that is forced upon us, and has Western civilization benefited from this diversity and this exposure to global cinema and other ideas? The subversion through the media has caused the degradation of the minds of men. Now, there isn't so much nudity in films anymore because of the democratization of the camera, where amateurs, in quotes, amateurs, are now given the means of production to create their own little home movies, which are made available to free on other websites and clip sites and tube sites, which are owned by people who are former Hollywood executives. So the film industry has shifted into the amateur category, which has just gotten even more extreme and gonzo and just desensitized everybody to it. No one's talked yet about the violence, the over-the-top violence, and the amount of murders people see. Killing and death isn't even real to anyone anymore. They don't know what death is in reality, because the media, all forms of media, including video games, music videos, every aspect of entertainment has gone so far extreme to niche potential, the potential of the niche audience. Your other point, Hunter, was that film brings people together and they expose them to new ideas. That's great. That happened once. People didn't like it, and then they never go back to seek out the stuff that doesn't agree with them already. Their interest in music is formed by the time they're 15 or 16, and they listen to that same genre of music the rest of their life. They listen to that same style the rest of their lives. The opinions are formed very early on, and then people continue to seek out things that they already are familiar with, that they already like, with the opinion they already agree upon. And a lot of times it's what their friends and their social peers and groups tell them is the correct opinion to have throughout the film and the media and the platform and the politics and all of that. So there is no true diversity or celebration of different points of view. People have multiple screens and they can watch multiple things at the same time. And many people do that. They have a movie playing and they're watching YouTube videos on their phone, reels and things. They're not focused on one thing. They're not taking in the message of the medium completely. They're not immersed, and they're not lost in the immersion of one media, one song. They're not playing an album from beginning to end. If they don't like a song, they're skipping it. If they don't like a song, not only do they skip it, but they delete it from their hard drive. Well, they're not even downloading things to their hard drive because everything is so ephemeral and it's thrown away. It doesn't mean anything. There's no collectability. It's not art. It's not passed on to people. It's a Spotify playlist to which they have to listen to the correct songs. So at the end of the year, they can show their Spotify rap lists to say that they listen to the proper songs that are accepted by their peer group. So there is no deviation from that norm.
I'd like to add something real quick.
Sure.
It's the process of individualism, where everyone is just focused on themselves, and Hollywood obviously is a nod to magic and sorcery. So movies become the new drug, right? Movies are video and audio, moving pictures, right? This is the new form of pharmakia. And then it evolves from movies to TVs. Now it's in your house, to cable, VHS players, more choices, keeping you more distracted and more things to look at, to consume. Turns into video games and computers, reality TV and social media, and now iPhones. So we're all being, while we see it as like, it is niche groups, but it's getting smaller and smaller, where it's just you, everything you need. And again, of course, the Matrix is an allegory to this, because now, do we put on the virtual helmet, go in the rec room, build a community in there, and that's where you spend most of your time. The economy is going to be built on that. So, was the original intention good? Kind of seems like they were showing us it wasn't. This is a broadcast. They are trying to get us divided, separated, individualized. So again, to weaken us. So again, I guess we're all agreeing with each other.
So wouldn't that, though, be the natural order of things once you made things into a Borg-like universal group, that now that we've applied a macroverse, that we're automatically going to now start subdividing into microverses, which now that we have this one thing, like before you, let's take the modern story. Not siding with the modern story here, but if we take the modern story of originally in this country, there was basically two groups, Native Americans and white people. And we turn around, and after 200 years, we're just Americans. But after at some point in time, we can look at like the 50s, which would have been the beginning of the heyday of Hollywood. We as a country were somewhat united, with small diverse factions, as is always going to exist. I don't care what kind of a utopia you're in, you're going to have somebody bitching around over in the corner over here about something. We as a country were fairly united and became the United States. And anytime, once again, you start, like when you look at things from the occult version, when part of the confusion with the transgenderism is this lack of understanding on how a cult really works. And when you isolate something down into just a masculine, well, now that everything in this group is masculine, well, now that I'm really staring at it, half the group's kind of more feminine than they are masculine, even though this whole group's masculine. And then now that we're looking at this homogenized group, I'm starting to notice a whole lot more other little differences too. Maybe they aren't all exactly the same. And so to me, it seems like this breaking apart into groups post unification would actually be a natural order of things.
I actually, I think you're right. I wanted to tie into the individualism. Is Tocqueville looked at America, I believe, 1800s, late 1800s, came from France, was looking. He predicted that this is where it would go, because he was saying, like, the nuclear family was the perfect family for capitalism, for the Protestant ethic. It was the best unit of consumption of the family setup. And so that through this, social bonds would get broken more and more until eventually you just be by yourself, afraid of your neighbors. So you give over your power to the government because you're in so much fear of, meeting up with the local community group and having a discussion about what you want to do in your community. All those social groups have broken down. And, so, yeah, I mean, I also do think it is kind of a natural progression in the sense of unconsciously we're developing the I. We've developed the I, the concept of, hey, I am John and you are. And so that's a level of consciousness. And now we need to, that's intellect, materialism. But now we need to raise back up out of that. So I do think that, to me, there feels like there is a shift where we've gone so individual, but now some of us are starting to make local groups and meet more. And even if we're doing it online, communities are being created. So it does feel like maybe we've gone to a certain point And some of us are like, wait a minute, this is important. Growing
So,
food.
wait, can I get a clarification on what you meant by the move? All right. So you said the nuclear family was the beginning of breaking this apart. What was the situation prior in your story here? What was
I
the
think
situation
it would be
prior?
more like multi-generational families, to go maybe back just a little step further, like more what Tocqueville predicted was that the government was sort of pushing us into more and more individualized, breaking social bonds, because that keeps us divided, which would turn us into a tyranny. We would give up our sovereignty, our power. So that would be my guess. I mean, I see that just even in my regular life. When my grandmother died, basically don't talk to all my cousins anymore. She was sort of the center of the family. And that's happened in multiple families that I've seen, amongst friends and things like that. And like my mom, she won't even consider moving in with us, but you see people come from different countries, they're living 6 people in an apartment and they're doing pretty well for themselves because they don't have this stigma, So anyway, it's just a theory, but it does seem, at least from my observation, that does seem
Now,
to have
what's interesting for me is honestly, so where I would put this, and this is a huge debate point. This would be a heater of a debate, but for me, actually, the invention of incest was the breaking point for this. So where the Catholic Church came in and stated that incest was illegal, we immediately started breaking apart the family structure. Whereas before, you had like a 99% chance of marrying a girl in your village or from the next village, which you were definitely related to. Most definitely. Like it wasn't your sister, but it was your cousin or somebody's that you're related to's kid. 100%. It's just how it worked out, because see, when you're not able to travel very far, your choices are very limited. And so when we look at those choices, those people, the people that they married, would have had interest in the success of the family. So say I married my second cousin. Well, my second cousin isn't going to want to see her family succeed over mine. We have the same family. Like, it's just a general family welfare that we're interested in. We're going to have the same basic religious beliefs. Our children are going to be more likely to follow up with the morals and the dictates that we live by, because that's what they've been taught. Where in today's world, very seldomly, even it seems, are the two people in the household religiously similar, background similar. We've definitely been pushed into that, and I would have to say that the start of that was the Catholic Church with the incest laws.
Well, I definitely think that played a role. If you look back into like the 1500s, it was illegal for a woman to travel alone. So a woman could not go to the next village over unless she was escorted by a man. So this is probably one of the things that really entrenched this incestuous lineage, is because you weren't allowed to go and try to seek a husband from another country or another.
I'm stating the incest is natural.
Well, what I'm saying is that one of the reasons that was happening is because you weren't allowed to kind of go outside of the confines of your family. I think the shift from the
so in the let's say 1400s, would that law have been to limit women in order to hamper them, like you're not allowed to do things, or would that law have been because you're about to go out and get raped by 6 highwaymen?
Probably the latter.
Right.
So
I mean, it's not like they were trying to do that. I mean, when I look at nature in and of itself, nature's horrifyingly incestuous. Every other animal in the world is horrifyingly incestuous. And what that does is this kind of dips. Boy, we're really completely away from Hollywood.
But are we really?
Are we though?
Right.
Hollywood is incestuous, and there's the idea of the nepotism. And I want to go back to what John was talking about, this Tocqueville idea, are these Dazed and Confused films glorifying drug use.
Mhm.
Tocqueville?
Are you cool, man? Be a lot
Are you
cooler.
cool?
I gotta end the one thing about Tocqueville though. The greatest thing about his theory is that he made a distinction between individualism and individuality. That individuality implies a group, implies other people. Individualism is like solipsism, like
All right.
Well, the shift away from a great agrarian society and culture where we are working on a farm together and we are all invested in that farm and that property, and moving people into the city and actually forcing men to go work in factories. This was the real destruction from my perspective of the family, because what you had was men who were running farms, which was a very, as you know, Benjamin, a very difficult life. These men suddenly were then tasked to go work for other men, which was completely emasculating. And many of those men became raging alcoholics, unable to work. And so women and children were sent into the factory. So the destruction and the erosion of the family happened when we moved out of the country into the city and were placed in these boxes, basically, which is not our nature. So I think that's the first step to this erosion of the communal society. As you were saying, John, if you meet people from South America or from Asia or from Africa, it's very common that you have multi-generational families living together. That's not only so you have built-in housekeeping or built-in daycare for your children, but there's also generational learning that's happening in those cultures and in those environments, and a respect for your elders. Where in an individuated society, what happens is, well, I turn 18, I want to move away from my family. I don't want to live with my grandma. I don't want to live because that's not cool. So I think there's definitely that aspect. But I think that one thing that happened through this whole past few years debacle is that suddenly people were moving back home, and suddenly you do have generational people living together. Right now we live in a home with Chris's father. So our sons are getting the knowledge from his father of working on cars, of building, of things that you wouldn't necessarily learn in the home. You might learn in high school by taking a shop class. But I did want to touch on 2 points before we get close to wrapping up. One, Alan, I don't know if you know about the Waldorf school system, but all of our children went to Waldorf schools, and so they learned handwork and farming and how to write in cursive and reading poetry and designing their own lesson books. So I don't think it is a lost cause. I think there's still people who are very much into maybe a dialing back and getting closer into this Luddite lifestyle. And what's amazing, it's just like the people who live in Silicon Valley who all are programmers who don't let their kids have iPhones. So the elite are sending their kids to Waldorf schools. All these fancy actors, all their kids are in Waldorf schools because they want them to have these very basic social skills. And to touch on the strikes, you guys may not know this, but there have been 5 strikes that a writer that I have been working with was a part of. And he said every strike in Hollywood was based on technology. So as technology increases, as we move away from VHS, there was a strike. When we moved into DVD, there was a strike. When we move into what was the next one? He mentioned what all 5 of them were. The last one was streaming. So with
Well,
the writers,
Blu-ray was probably the other one.
right. So when the writers' strike happened recently, it was because of the streaming services and these giant companies making shit tons of money, and the writers saying, "Hey, we want a cut of the pie." So it's kind of an interesting. If you kind of track that, you can see how Hollywood is trying to move forward in a certain way, and they're not bringing the talent along with it. So then the talent wakes up and they're like, hey, you're making all the fucking money and we're not getting a cut of that. So that has really influenced and affected the system. What I'm saying is the studio system, what I call Hollywood, is dead. It does not exist. Meaning there's not just 3 studios, there's not just 3 actors, there's not just 3 producers, there's not 3 films that are being made a year. Now, yes, it has been democratized, but in that democratization, what has happened is it has destroyed.
You're right. It is crud. It's all crud. It's all garbage.
It has destroyed what was this very closed boys club predatory system. That is gone. Does that mean that they're still not predators, or now they're female predators? Now there's female executives that are like, if you want this movie, you have to fuck me, because they're trying to play in the boys club. But I'm just saying that this infrastructure that was completely in control is gone. But the CIA is still involved in Hollywood. There's still propaganda in Hollywood. All of those things are still happening. They're just not being maybe policed in the same way as they were 40 years ago.
Have they moved to YouTube?
Yes. Well, they're in every corporate headquarters. So now it's Viacom, it's Amazon. I mean, it's still there's still an infrastructure, but it's a corporate overlord who's standing over that. It's not just the CIA who is making films.
It's also Mossad.
Yeah.
So I don't know what Catholic priests had said this. They probably all said this at some point, but there was a statement, something along the lines of having a television in your living room is like having a rabbi in your living room. So it was very clear that there's distinctions between religious groups, churches, and neighborhoods. And then they were very clear to say that this is a tool of propaganda from one perspective. That perspective is being broadcast on the 3 channels that are going out over the air. Now we have this own nothing and be happy idea moving forward into this age of the Aryan, the age of air. I don't know. You get hippy dippy new age ideas that, we were in one certain age and now we're in this more ethereal sort of space where everything can just be deleted and gone, and minimalism, and don't need to own anything, which then moves into this rewriting of history, created mandala effects, where you get George Lucas, who can't tell you, well, Han shot first or who shot first. Well, all the old versions are deleted. They're not canon. They're not real. And the story changes with each release. And with a digital library, those books that you own, the music you own, they can change one aspect of it in your digital library, and you wouldn't know because you don't have a permanent copy to compare it to. So this sort of gaslighting and rewriting of history and tearing down statues, this is what the medium has been used for all along. Clearly, the overall purpose and going backwards and analyzing what it's done and how it's been used, it's always been a tool that's been sharpened into a weapon that's done innumerable damages to all sorts of people. But because we're in love, we have such an affinity towards actresses that we saw when we were very influential in our development stage, and that actress, the way she dressed, the nylon tights that she wore, the fishnet stockings, that is forever what a certain generation is always going to want and desire. But then the shifting beauty standards, as seen on the film and in the magazines and the covers in Vogue and the fashion industry, that shifts it, that changes the fabrics, it changes the styles over time. So it's always a moving target, and it never satisfies. So it's always this carrot dangling in front of us, but it's not a real carrot. So we're hungry for a spiritual fulfillment. Women generally want attention. Men give women attention to get the sexual gratification, and neither are satisfied because they're both using each other. You go to a movie and you learn romance, and then you take a blue pill and you swallow it. And after the Matrix release in 1999, movies were completely ruined because everyone had to put their own interpretation on the movie. So you have this red pill idea that came from a meme, from a film, and the red pill meant something different to everybody. You would ask, what does the red pill mean? What taking the red pill means seeing the truth, but it was one specific truth from a point of view from one specific person you asked. You ask another person, and it could be equal and opposite to what the other guy had just said. So it's not one consensus reality, it's the fractured reality where people find information that confirms their bias. That's the weapon that splits everyone apart. So now we're focused on our own thoughts, our own opinions, our own feelings, our own affinities and loves and lusts and desires for things that we didn't even know were presented to us and given to us. It wasn't something that we thought about consciously. So it's the subconscious ideas. And movies are parroted, they're repeated. I went and saw an early release of that Borat film, that very long title Borat film with that funny guy. I saw an early release. I thought it was funny. I chuckled. I realized that the language that we thought was Kazakhstan, they were actually speaking Hebrew in the film. So the language we didn't understand was Hebrew. We knew English, but we didn't know Hebrew. So people who could speak Hebrew were laughing. All the English speakers thought it was Kazakhstan, and they read the subtitles and they weren't getting the message. A month later, 2 months later, when it was in wide release, everyone said, "Very nice." You know, her sleeve hangs like a sleeve of like her vagina hangs like sleeve of wizard, or these phrases that people kept repeating over and over again, just proves that people absorb stuff, don't think about it, don't process it, and then repeat it. This is how women dress themselves. What is the model wearing? What is my favorite actress wearing? I'm going to wear that. Men did the same thing. They'd smoke cigarettes and wear cowboy hats when Westerns were popular. Westerns are very unpopular now. We don't have Westerns. The film industry, in large part, established the genre of the Western film, and that was the American movie. For a huge portion of its industry, they were putting out Westerns, those types of movies. And then maybe it moves into the Vietnam era, and then you get something like MASH. And David Foster Wallace noticed that there was men of a certain generation that got very obsessed with MASH to the point where they'd keep journals and logs and notes, and they just write everything down, which leads into now we have the internet and computers. When I go and search for information and I find information about World of Warcraft, before I find any real world information, so the world of fiction has completely taken over the minds of everyone. It's taken over the internet. There's no easily searched way to say, can I only have search results that are based on reality from newspapers and historical periodicals? I don't need to know the history of Pokemon. I don't need to know the lore of yokai and Japanese demons from video games. That's very interesting, but I don't want to get my news and history from movie synopsises. And that's the other thing. If we watch a movie like E.T. proving aliens are real, and then the walkie-talkie, well, it was a gun. I remember it was a gun, but now it's a walkie-talkie. So they changed these things. And the Goonies was so filthy, but I only ever saw the safe television version. So the censorship aspect. So even if we watch the same Blu-ray copy of a movie and then we talk about it later, everyone in the room saw a different movie. The movies aren't bringing us together. They're driving us into our escapism, into our strange furry fetishes, Space Jam, that Lola Bunny in the newest Space Jam movie. All the girls on OnlyFans are doing her cosplay of this sexy anthropomorphic rabbit bunny thing. And now there's a whole generation of 12-year-olds who are like, I like girls with rabbit teeth and fuzzy. Wait, but wasn't that Playboy? So then it goes back further. So then I'm thinking, well, it's not a new thing. It's the same old thing in recycled cycles over and over again. And the only way to quote unquote escape the matrix is to stop trying to figure out what the meaning of that movie was. We don't care what the occult symbolism in a film is. We have our own lives to live. We have our own diaries and journals to keep, but instead we're talking about movies we like and sports ball games and circus. So it goes back to the Roman idea of bread and circuses over and over and over again. So at this point in my life, recognizing that all the video games, all the movies, all the music, and all the pop culture stuff that I have all this knowledge about, it's absolutely worthless because it's all my own interior life in my own way of entertaining myself to pass time. And time is tick, 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 tick talking. And I'm a dancing nurse during a pandemic. What does it matter and what does it mean? There's no value in any of this stuff. It's completely pulling out all the value of an individual life, and it's making a mockery of it. And everyone is sarcastic, and everyone is insincere, and everyone jokes and has an opinion and a comment about everything else, but no one is doing the heroic thing. But they'll go and complain that other military people are stealing valor from true heroes, and they're arguing over inconsequential things. And this is all enforced through movies and documentaries which portray, in quotes, real life, but it's the furthest thing from it. It's the furthest thing from it.
My favorite part during that very extended diatribe was that Marcus completely took the opposite position and switched sides. That was my favorite part of it.
That's what I was going to say.
In the middle, Marcus like, fuck Hollywood, I can't do this anymore.
I was going to say the same thing. This is Marcus's argument for Hollywood.
I give up. I can't defend those guys, those women, the gay agenda. It's indefensible.
I want to share this again. I know you saw it, but it was kind of while you were talking, but I thought this kind of relates. Gen X is always mad because we had to replace our record collections with the tape collection and then replace that with the CD collection, then with the MP3 collection, and now we need to stream it. And I was thinking on that with what Alan was saying is that I used to think you can't really ever burn all the books. But in this way, you maybe could get everything onto a file, and it's kind of like the memory hole, right? It's like if everything is online now and that's where you have to go search for it, you lose a lot of control.
You don't even need to burn the books is the funny thing, because I mean, when you look at it, literally how many people even open an article and read what the article says? Whatever the general consensus of what that says, whatever they heard about it, they're never going to open the article up and read it. And I can't imagine that it's any different for a book. You know what I mean? Like the books are always, I think, like You can walk in any used bookstore and pick books up for 50 fucking cents. Like, you got assholes like Archaic sitting there with a whole library behind. Hey, look at my library. Like, dude, that was $12 in a used bookstore. Don't fucking.
It's performative set dressing. This is what I'm saying. People are not authentic at all. They don't even know who they are. So they imitate people that they look up to, role models, sex symbols, whatever it is. The coolest guy in the movie. There's a strange phenomenon of a certain specific person at a certain time in history who would become a Michael Jackson impersonator. You get Corey Feldman, who's still doing that Michael Jackson impersonation.
That's the second time you just brought up Goonies, and now and you know what? When you were talking about Goonies and how I was like, is he just a Corey Feldman acolyte? And now here you are talking about Feldman again. Is that your whole fucking problem, that Feldman didn't get the glory that he deserved?
Hollywood did him dirty. There's no successful Disney movie actress. Child actors, that's a whole other debate that we get into, but the exploitation of children extends to the exploitation of every actor on film. Everyone is exploiting themselves behind a camera, performing like a monkey in front of a camera for likes and treats and upvotes and whatever it is, the social credit score stuff. It's so dumb. And I've been to situations where I'm in a private setting and someone's like, that's great. They take a camera out and they want to take pictures. I don't consent to being photographed. I thought it was understood. The social contract here was, we're in a private home. We're not taking pictures. We're not posting to Facebook, and we're not tagging each other on social media. Let's protect our privacy. What happened to this sort of thing where women on Snapchat are taking pictures of their children all along? They're so lonely and isolated. And then the men are just going on there and they're like, ooh, content, great, okay. And then the women are like, this is my daughter, this is my son, this is first day of school. They're documenting their lives, they're moving on, and they're wondering, well, where are all the men? Where are all the cool guys smoking cigarettes and riding camels and exploring Egypt and doing cool stuff? They're all incels. All the men are incels. And the women are so frustrated.
I get laid.
And it's Hollywood.
At some point, we've probably run out of time, but at some point I would love to talk about violence and men because there is a lot of information about that out in the world, and I would love to hear you guys' take on it.
Wonderful. We would love to have you back. This has been great. We'll figure out how to formulate what you're thinking into a debate prompt. Actually, I think this kind of goes in with something that John had mentioned, that there is now the trope going around that men shouldn't be around kids because they have anger issues and things like that. I think this will fit. I already thought that this was a conversation that needed to be had. We would love to have you back and have it. We need to figure out how to make it into a debate prompt. Does
violent imagery make men violent? Because that could be music, that could be film, that could be cartoons, that could be video games.
Yeah.
You would have to include in there, are men just inherently violent? And then also in the prompt somewhere, figure out how to word it in a way that is that a problem? Because that's where I'm going to go with it is I don't see a problem with violence myself. For all that we claim, we were all taught in school. Most of us are Gen X, we were all taught in school and taught by society that violence didn't solve any problems. Which fucking problems are those? Because which ones weren't solved by violence historically? typically there's a breakdown at some point in time in diplomacy where one side takes a hard stand and the other side takes a hard stand. And then when that can't be resolved, violence.
Right.
What happens?
Just very, very quickly to your point, the study that I saw was that if you try to inhibit young boys' expression of violence, whether it be through imagery, drawings, or writing, that actually stunts development.
Not only that, but I would state that it makes them more violent. Where you see these young men that are, especially the libtards that live in a city that have never actually, like I grew up getting punched in the mouth and throwing off of bales and throwing people off bales and drop kicking them and things like that. And in that time when I was allotted to have violent fun, I learned about violence. And now I am very, very aware of where to apply that. In the application of it, I understand what the application of it's going to do, how much it's going to take. And that's only through use of it. So now that I'm an adult and I don't need to have play violence, the violence when it's needed, and there's many times that it's needed, that's something I'm perfectly comfortable with. But then at the same token, when it's not needed, I'm perfectly comfortable with not having it. And because I'm like a bird that lands on a branch that's not worried about the branch because it can fly, I'm less prone to violence because I'm not scared, because I'm comfortable. It's a similar effect of my big fat pit bull over here, Tier. That guy has literally been bit in the face like 20 times by small dogs. He's just like, dude, what are you doing over here? What are you doing?
To William McKnight's point, this is a brilliant book, Power versus Force, written by David R. Hawkins. This is really, really great book talking about energy and different types of energy and how we express energy. But this is a very powerful conversation, and I would definitely like to be involved in it again.
100%.
You know, I wanted to point out that in the childcare field, there's kind of a philosophy starting to go around that you should allow young boys to roughhouse if they're not hurting each other.
Absolutely.
Because typically it would be like, you know, no, you can't play that way, it's dangerous. But now they're recognizing that that's a natural state for boys to kind of tumble around together. Not all boys, but some of them need that.
Absolutely.
And so, you know,
and it can cause speech impediments and all kinds of issues if you try to suppress that energy.
Yeah, I would say that the imagery and the technology probably suppressed that first and then gave them, you know, violent games to like play that out in their mind. And so it's like a false sense of that righteous anger. So
absolutely.
Well, you never develop reality with it. Like in a video game, I can kill the entire team and it's okay. They're going to respawn. I realize if I hurt my friend's not going to respawn, because in real life, that's what I've been experiencing. And there's a disconnect there that they need to have that violence. And in fact, I would state that even if they hurt each other, as long as it's not like one kid just beating the brakes, like little boys need to hurt each other, because it's that hurting each other is where they really start working things out. That, you know what, that can happen without me having to go scorched earth. That's okay. That sometimes, like one of the things, like this is it Frazetta that said a barbarian will always be more polite than a civilized man, because a civilized man doesn't fear getting his skull split. Like, you know, when you've been punched in the mouth for saying something slick a few times and getting too out of line, you quit wanting to get out of line. That's, you know, that's and it's through that boys learn how to interact. Like you see this with animals too. Totally. When animals are interacting with each other, especially it's bad now because we pull puppies and kittens away from their parents so fast, but they will teach them how to socially interact with each other. When they've gone too far, they'll snap and put, like you see a mom a mom dog, when the puppy gets too rowdy, she'll put her mouth on her, just smash her to the ground. Like, you don't do that. And the puppies, they learn. And this is, again, one of the things I would have liked to have debated, and we will in the future, is whether we're in a masculine or a feminine society. And we're, in my opinion, we are in a highly feminine society.
Totally.
And because of that, we have absolutely curbed and to ill effect the masculine.
It's created an inversion.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's made crazy, very violent men who aren't really men. They're very cucked and they're violent. They're ready to just go off the deep end with things rather than have a reasonable response. And that's measured.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. I have so enjoyed this. It's been amazing.
Yeah, thanks for being on.
Absolutely. And we will definitely set that up and make another show out of that. And William, you need to pick a good subject and make sure you got some good internet. And pick something that we can debate on. This was so hard. I'm glad you picked it because it was a very good mental exercise. But holy shit, trying and make Hollywood out to not shit on that thing. Wow, it needs to burn and die. It needs to burn and die.
So what do I do? Do I just leave the studio? How do I?
Yeah. We'll actually we'll close it out. You guys ready to close it out?
We can close the stream out and then hang out after the broadcast.
Yeah, and then us guys usually talk. But yeah, you just hit leave studio. And yeah, let's do this again. Thank you, Hunter.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks,
It's
everybody.
a pleasure. Love you
guys.
guys.
Have a good night.
We'll see you soon.
Love you guys.
Thanks everybody for coming.
You win.
You metal, dude.
Deliberating. Deliberating. Deliberating.
Dogface.
Deliberating.
Dogface, I'm the dude.
One minute, dude.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fight!